Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much for coming. If you were with us last Christmas, we are lucky enough to have again with us Chaplain Mike. I can't pronounce his last name because I butcher it, so I'm not going to embarrass him by doing that. He is an active duty chaplain, Protestant, community on base, and for everything we do that I want a chaplain, I always want active duty. I just think because their fingers on the pulse of those who are defending us now. I am going to turn this over to Chaplain Mike, and then if you will introduce Airman Stouts afterwards.
Yes. Thank you.
He's actually up first in the program.
Yes, so A1C Barrick Stotts, come on up here. And he and I were commiserating this morning about what we could talk about. And some of you might find interest in how the career field of the Chaplain Corps has shifted over the years. So we're going to give you a little 2-minute Chaplain Corps brief. We do this around the base. We have new airmen come, F-Tech and F-TOC, so enlisted and officer, and we'll say, here's what the Chaplain Corps does, and we do it together, chaplains and, what are you called now?
Religious Affairs Airmen.
So, how many of you remember the title Chaplain's Assistant?
Yeah.
Chaplain's Assistant was what they were called.
Yeah.
And there are probably a couple other names over the years, but now they're called Religious Affairs Airmen. And tell them a little bit about what you do and what you're trained to do.
Yeah. So
Because you are brand new.
yes.
Yeah.
So new to the Air Force as September of last year, and I was able to go through a selection process through a board of chaplains out in the UK actually. So I had about 4 chaplains who had interviewed me with some select questions on why I should have the job. And after getting through that board of questions, I waited in the DEP program, the delayed entry program, wanting to finish high school before I left. I figured that's probably pretty important before I left. And joining in September, went through basic training just like every other airman. Went through my tech school down in Keesler, Mississippi for a Religious Affairs Airman. And that was about 8 weeks of training on crisis intervention, how to help people with their mental health, how to help people on their worst days. A lot of our things is also being very pluralistic in all of our different religions, whereas chaplains are specialized to their own religion that they've been endorsed by. Religious Affairs Airmen are trained to understand most religions that the Air Force supports. If you didn't know, everyone knows Star Wars just about, but you can be a Jedi in the Air Force. The DoD recognizes Jediism. Yes, that's Yoda, Obi-Wan, and all of them as an actual religion that you can pursue. And as Religious Affairs Airmen, we learn about all these different branches of faith that people can have. And so by learning in this pluralistic environment, we're able to set up for different environments. At Wright-Patterson, we have our Catholic environment, and we have our Protestant. We are also working with a Jewish lay leader, where we have different off-base organizations. If we can't directly support, we will refer. And so that's the day-to-day, is really just helping out with each and every person that could come in for a crisis counseling. You could stub your toe, or you could lose a loved one. And any of that we will support you for. We have 100% confidentiality, which is special to Religious Affairs or Chaplain's Assistant, and that's the only branch, or the only job in the Air Force that has 100% confidentiality. Whereas mental health will have to report against UCMJ violations, harm to self or others. Religious Affairs is a 100% confidential help, so that people can receive the help that they want and feel confident that they can get help.
There are just a couple things that chaplains do that Religious Affairs Airmen are not intended to do. But there's also one thing that Religious Affairs Airmen do that chaplains cannot do, which is
Paperwork.
carry a weapon.
That is right. I have not had the privilege to be able to be a security detail yet, but that is something that we also are. We are qualified for the M9, the side service pistol, so that we can have a security detail in the times where security forces or another security detail cannot be present.
We have a chaplain deployed right now to undisclosed location with a staff sergeant from our team, and they call the staff sergeant during training, they call him his meat shield. So the chaplain's about 5'7",
Oh, yeah.
and the staff sergeant's about 6'2". So it worked pretty well. But yeah, so chaplain, religious affairs airmen, one key role, especially in deployed combat environments, that they would carry a weapon, and we can't even touch ammunition, let alone use a weapon, unless it's under extreme extenuating circumstances. Then we could for self-defense, but that's, the modus operandi of chaplains. We are non-combatant commissioned officers, and do not carry at all. But yeah, they provide privileged communication, confidential counseling. We provide directly for religious communities and for my Protestant pastoring, shepherding, and that kind of thing, ordinances or sacraments and stuff like that. But they help set up that. So arrange the chapel, the auditorium, the sanctuary, buy elements, buy different pieces and tools that people need for that kind of thing. And a lot of program management. So next Wednesday, you and I have been working on a project. It's a dorm airman resiliency event. We're calling it Christmas Karaoke. And it's going to be at the Wright-Pat USO, and we're going to be serving pizza to hopefully about 100 airmen, and cocoa and cookies, and I'm going to do a little chaplain chat, and that kind of stuff falls into our team as well. So we work together on a lot of things, resiliency events, and sometimes it's a marriage seminar or parenting seminar, where we might do a retreat to Great Wolf Lodge for single parents with their kids and run all the programming, do a lot of stuff like that. So, any questions for Airman Stotts?
Sounds like a fascinating career field.
I've thoroughly enjoyed it. Been on station since January, and it's been a career. I actually really only, since being on
Yeah,
station
you've got
in
this tab
January,
right here, you might go.
I've
You
got a
spent
little
6 of
tab
those
here.
months.
and I've only really been in the religious affairs career field for about 3-4 months now.
Yeah.
It took me away for honor guard to serve with memorial details, and during that time I was able to even lean into more of what religious affairs specialists, religious affairs airmen do, and provide counseling through the loss of the loved one. Over the past 6 months, from April 15th until roughly end of October, which is about 5 months, I was providing about 148 different services for loved ones around the area of Michigan, Ohio, Indiana, Kentucky, and West Virginia, traveling about 42,000 miles in about that 5 months. And the last month was spent training the next rotation. And I worked alongside helping people in every way. I mean, it was an amazing thing for sure. So,
The Chaplain Corps works alongside of the Honor Guard all the time, nearly every week, whether it's an invocation for retirement ceremony, promotion ceremony, or memorial service. So many different events, we're working together. So it was pretty neat for him as a brand new, fresh out of tech school to get picked up at the Honor Guard, had 6 months of experience with that. And he learned how to make things crisp and stuff with his walking and folding, and he kept his hair really cut short too. So
A1C, that's 3 stripes?
this is 2 stripes. So with an A1C, it is now 2 stripes. It used to be your 3 and the 4, and now they've changed it a little bit. So now they have the extra stripe on the bottom rather than the top. They moved the bottom stripe to the top, so it's a little easier to see, so it's not so congested in there.
I was at A1C, and it took me 3 years to get it, and career field was frozen, critical, surplus, all that kind of stuff. You're a 2-striper in how many years?
Well, believe it or not, I may or may not have achieved 2 stripes in about 4 months.
Wow.
So made E3 in about 4 months, and that's what the Air Force
This
is.
is a brand new career field?
So this career field has been around since, I want to say it's about the 1980s. When it was originally introduced, it was introduced as they kind of bounced back between the names because the Air Force doesn't like the title of assistant. If you're an assistant and they want to make a budget cut, why have 2 people make the same job? And so we bounced around from chaplain's assistant. We had religious affairs specialist, was way back, and I want to say the 80s or 90s was kind of one of the original titles, was a chaplain's affairs specialist. And they've evolved and changed, and the most recent change was in 2018 when they changed from chaplain's assistant, when the Air Force said, we don't need all these extra jobs doing the same work. So they said, we're going to take a chaplain's assistant and make it religious affairs, and make it sound a little more, a little more special. And so it's worked out.
But they
so
are
far.
much more than an assistant.
Yeah,
too.
transitioning that career field to civilian life is pretty tough, isn't it?
Could be, but that segues to his long-term goal. You can share about that from him.
Yes. So my long-term dream has always been to be a chaplain. Since honestly, I could think about 12 years old is when I really started narrowing down my career path. But even if you want to look back and start narrowing down a little thread going through my life, it can be about 4 years old when one of my good family friends, Nikki Rausch, was killed in Afghanistan by an IED. And that was something where me coming from a faith background, whereas you don't need to be religious to be a religious affairs airman, but for me, that was something where I wanted to know where he went, because he was an amazing person. And I wanted to know, how can I meet him again? I was about 4 years old when he passed away. That's when my parents gave me the faith talk and went through the steps of Christianity there. And that's been just a long-term dream. And I said, what's a better way to get to be the job you want than to work right alongside them? And if I need to, I can walk right across the hallway and be into 4 different chaplains' office. And it's been an amazing thing. So, and working alongside Chaplain
He has
Breznau
to chase me
here.
down, 'cause I don't
I
know.
say, he's always running,
I got
and
to-
he is quite the runner, I will tell you that. And if he's told you anything about all the different races he's run, my goodness, he's quick.
Well, it's nice to see you very excited and passionate
Yeah,
about what
absolutely.
it is.
I really missed him when he was gone for 6 months. When is Stotts getting back? We need to get things done around here.
I said, I got a couple texts around, it's like, hey, when are you coming back? Like, we thought we were coming back this month. I said, I'm here for another couple months now still. But I really enjoyed helping people, and so I wanted to make it my career. Because if you really enjoy doing something, you never work a day in your life.
Yeah.
And so being able to be as a chaplain and work alongside a dream just to eventually become that dream, it's something amazing. And I can't tell you how many other people get to say they've been working their dream career for the last 5 years, 6 years. That takes some time when you're 19 years old and you're trying to make a career for yourself.
I believe that life is also like a big tapestry, and God is weaving this together. So the first day he showed up at a staff meeting, he's sitting across the room, and he said, "I'm from Michigan." Of course, I'm from Michigan too. And then somebody asked him, why do you want to be here in religious affairs airmen? And then he launched into his calling to be a chaplain and learn and grow. And then later we got talking, found out he grew up going to a summer camp that the church that I pastored in Grand Rapids also went to. And we have a bunch of mutual friends, including the youth pastor at his home church was my intern when I was a lead pastor in Grand Rapids. What?
Amazing connections.
I'm
that
also
somehow
the
just
same
like-
age as his dad, which makes me feel old. But anyway, so we, my kids call him Uncle Barrick. Yeah, it's very, very exciting. So you can take a seat, I guess, for a minute. And he's going to share one of the stories that we have with you. These are not the stories that I shared last year. This is why I'm calling it Christmas in the Military 2.0. Christmas in the Military 2.0. But first, I have a couple pictures because our family's now also 2.0, or I should say 7.0, because we've had an addition there, little ginger snap, as I call her. We moved to Ohio June 1st last year, and something must be in the water, because my wife is 43, and we have a brand new baby. We have 5 children now. So Jack is the one in my arms. You might have met him. I think he was here in March. We adopted him at birth. He just turned 3. And then we have Hudson on the far end. He's almost 16. And he wants to get a driver's license. And I think that's insane. He's a good kid. And then Everlynn's 12. She'll be 13 before he hits 16. And then Carson, he just turned 8. And then Avonlea. So, and my wife Stephanie. Avonlea arrived 5.5 weeks early, and by emergency C-section, my wife was severely preeclamptic, and her blood pressure was sky high, and her blood sugar was off, and we went to Miami Valley Hospital downtown, and they waited around for a whole day and then decided, we're going to admit you to a room, and then about 9 o'clock at night, the doctor came in and said, "You're going to have a baby tonight." We thought this was kind of like wait and see, and a few weeks later this will happen. But it was complicated, and she was breech. The little stinker was breech, and so we couldn't do natural delivery, and so she was there 10:30, I think, in the evening, boom, and happy and healthy, but she stayed in a NICU for 24 days because then she started having these neonatal sleep apnea episodes, and her heart rate would drop, and her pulse and and her blood oxygenation would drop, and now she's happy and healthy, tiny but mighty. She weighed in yesterday at the Wright-Patterson Med Center at 11 pounds 13 ounces, and she's 7 months old next week, so she's really tiny. She's 0 percentile, but she's growing. More length than tummy at this point, but you can see her beautiful blue eyes there. She smiles all the time like that. I mean, all day long. She's smiling, cooing, talking, trying to talk. She has these conversations with my wife. So our house is never quiet for 5 days. It's just never quiet. Now that's my little crew there, and I've come prepared with a handful of stories. Last time I gathered stories from friends. You might recall. So I posed the question to a bunch of my buddies. One of the reasons why I'm a chaplain is because one of the best friends I had growing up joined the Air Force, signed on the dotted line actually before he turned 18. His mom signed that waiver, and then as soon as he turned 18, he was off to BMT. And he had some really significant struggles and ended up leaving the Air Force a lot earlier than he thought. And when he got home, I'm there, and I hired him into my landscape business. But over the course of the next 15 years or so, his life was very complicated, and I often thought, I wonder how it would have been if a chaplain had gotten really involved, somebody to really help him. And then other reasons. When I went off to seminary down in Dallas, Texas, my closest buddies were all military veterans. And I have a book by one of them. I'm going to share a little bit about him. He's the last story. But I was in a military academy when I was 20. Well, I turned 20 in their basic training. I was 19. I was your age. And it was a private org military academy, and you paid to be there. They didn't pay you. And you got college credits and so forth. And that kind of put the seed thought in my mind, in my heart about military life and then ministry. But I have some stories from history because I love history. I love studying ecclesiastical church history, and I love studying American history. And so I've got stories from history. Some of them you probably could tell better than me, but I like rehearsing the stories. And he's prepared one also. He's got it all in his head. He's ready to tell the story from history. So we got some history, military, Christmas stories, and then also, because I minored in music in college, and music is a big part of our family, I've got a couple perhaps unknown Christmas song military stories. You might not know that some of these stories link up to the military. But the first one, you probably know this story pretty well.
Yeah.
1776, Washington's famous crossing of the Delaware River. And so some of the material I've gathered from the Department of Defense and military.com and other places. But the winter of 1776 didn't start out very well. Didn't start out good for General George Washington. His Continental Army was struggling. They suffered many defeats in the first few months of the American Revolution and had been pushed out of New York and New Jersey into Pennsylvania. So if you haven't taken a road trip in a while, that's kind of far. They didn't have cars back then. And so they're being pushed and pushed and pushed out. And the troops had low morale. Way worse than what we had in the 5th week of OTS when all the medical personnel got to graduate early. And suddenly we had to stay for another 4 weeks. This was way worse than that, right? Washington needed to renew faith in the battle for independence because the soldiers were losing sight, thinking maybe it's not worth it. So he decided to surprise the Hessians, with the German troops hired by the British, who were stationed in Trenton, New Jersey. His plan was, he figured that Christmas season and Christmas Day, they would probably be kind of hungover. I'm putting it lightly. But the enemy's Christmas celebrations would find them groggy. That's how the Department of Defense worded it. Groggy and unprepared for a fight. Especially, and a terrible winter storm was brewing, so they had to just hunker down and not expect the Continental Army to come plowing through. But he was right, actually. So late Christmas night. You wanna do this on Christmas night? Airman Stotts? Yeah. Late Christmas night, Washington and his troops hopped into boats and waded across the icy river, the Delaware River, to test his theory. He was correct, and at dawn on December 26th, about 2,400 frozen Continentals pushed into Trenton. It had been extremely cold and wet, and they did indeed surprise the enemy, who surrendered within an hour and a half. 90 minutes. Incredible. The mission became known as the Battle of Trenton. It was a huge significant push forward for the Continental Army's cause. Not only did it raise the troops' spirits, but it revived the hope of the colonists that there was hope. They were beginning to think their battle for independence wasn't feasible, but suddenly it looked like it was. So that's the first one. And then this one is connected to music. I've got some more. So have you seen this before? Can you read underneath there? Paris exhibition. Can you see that?
1800.
Sousa's band, right? So he wrote Stars and Stripes Forever, right? Stars and Stripes Forever. John Philip Sousa. When I was a little kid, my mom she's kind of quirky. I love her. To wake us up, she didn't have a simple alarm clock. Instead, she had a cassette and then the CD. When we got a cassette, it's the CDs. And she had Sousa marches. Because he has all kinds of marches, John Philip Sousa. And she had albums of these, and she'd crank them on at 5 o'clock in the morning and wake us kids up. It's time for Bible study with Dad before he leaves for work. This is the home I grew up in, by the way. So this isn't exactly a military action, but this song obviously is a symbol of America's military might, and it became March. So John Philip Sousa, who grew up during the Civil War, so actually, it's 1900, it's a little hard to read there, but the song was written just before 1900, was a talented musician. He became a longtime director of the U.S. Marine Band, known as the March King. You could almost think of him as celebrity status, like he was the rock star of the day. People knew John Philip Sousa, eventually starting his own band in 1892. And on Christmas Day in 1896, Christmas Day, while crossing the Atlantic on his way home from a European vacation, Sousa's lasting legacy came to him. He said the notes for Stars and Stripes Forever were born out of homesickness and fond memories of his time as the Marine Band's leader. And so the iconic song officially became America's national march in 1987. So actually 101 years later, it became officially America's national march. And so you can think of it, there's a little thought. This holiday season, instead of playing maybe Jingle Bells, play for your family Stars and Stripes Forever, because it's actually a Christmas song. And think about, too, troops, past and present, who are foregoing their holidays for the greater good of our country, including my buddy, who I really miss, Chaplain Jeremiah Henderson, who is in a country in Africa right now. Very rustic accommodations. He's doing chapel with the goats and the monkeys. I'm not kidding. He's been able to send me some pictures. And chapel is open air. And then he has Staff Sergeant Zachary Jackson from our team with him right now. And they're it. He's the only chaplain. And baptized some people in the Manda Bay a couple weeks ago. Pretty cool. But he will be gone for Christmas. His wife and 7 children in Springfield. All right, it's your turn now.
All right.
Airman Stotts has
Never guess you hear from me
one.
again.
Here we go. There's a picture.
So, does this ring any bells? What happened here? I see some nodding. So I have a question for you. I know we have lots of veterans here. Can you raise your hand if you're a veteran? Thank you for your service, first off. Do we have any sports players? So no veterans and sports players reside in Breznau. All right.
We're too old for sports.
That's right.
So now, how many of you during your time in service had ever thought, you know, I'm going to go sit down with someone I really don't like, that we're at war with, and I'm going to play a game with them? I can't imagine any of you. I would hope not, at least. I think that's a concern of interest here. But what we have here is a depiction of the British and the German soldiers at Christmastime, an entire ceasefire. I have, through the miraculous gifts of technology, I wrote notes out on my computer, didn't bring my computer, and somehow they're on my phone now through some sort of connection here. But, just to make sure I get all the dates correctly, we have the Christmas Truce of 1914 here. This was the unofficial ceasefire that took place between December 24th and December 26th. This was when soldiers from both sides, it's quoted that they had heard singing from the other side. And it's been going on for a while, and this was December 24th. That this singing has been going on for a while, and the British troops had thought that the Germans had absolutely just lost their mind. They're like, oh, they're going crazy now. They must be. Who would be singing in the middle of a war? And that's when a voice rang out from the German side saying, come and meet me. Stop, put down your weapons, and come and meet me. This is when the British troops had called back out, and it's quoted once again that the Germans had said, just meet me in the middle, in a very thick German accent. And with a language barrier even, the British troops had yelled back out, meet me in the middle. We'll put our weapons down, we'll call a ceasefire, just meet me in the middle. And so they met each other in the middle of no man's land, this area destroyed by the weapons that they were using. And they sat down and played together. Well, you know, Germans love their beer, right? I'm sure this was quite the party. And I remember from different research growing up, because I'm familiar with this story a little bit, that a lot of the time there were these higher enlisted officers looking at these children, these 16, 17, 18-year-olds on the other side, absolutely distraught of what they go into only 2 days later. But this is the miracle of Christmas here, that there is one thing uniting everything else in this world, if, you know, that is your faith. And mind you, that's a religious affairs thing, because chaplains can speak freely. Religious affairs airmen have to be a little non-biased, or say in my personal opinion, when addressing anything that's not our area of expertise here. But once again, going back to this story, we had about 100,000 troops meeting in the middle. And not all of these troops knew about it. This was just these units here that were in the war in this area. The commanders didn't even know that it happened. All of a sudden, they found out later, yeah, we were out and drinking and partying, playing football and soccer and all of these different games here with the people we were at war with. And it was quite a crazy thing. Some would say a Christmas miracle. And that's the story of the Christmas Truce of 1914.
An additional note to that, when the British High Command found out what had happened, they ordered their troops never do that again, because you can't go out and kill somebody that you're friends with.
Yeah, it's a great place to be in a museum, isn't it? There's always something to learn. That's amazing.
Yeah.
I studied a little.
Here have the stats. Yeah. So we've got another one. This is moving kind of chronologically here. So we've gone from 1776 to 1896 to World War I. And now this, certainly some of you may have lived through the news of this one from Vietnam. 1972, Operation Linebacker 2 in North Vietnam. This President Richard Nixon actually, this became named as the 11 Days of Christmas. American troops were in the middle of the biggest bombing mission in military history during the Christmas season of 1972. The air campaign called Operation Linebacker 2 has largely been considered the action that ended U.S. involvement in the Vietnam War. President Richard Nixon ordered the bombings to begin on December 18th after North Vietnamese delegates walked out on peace talks. Nicknamed the 11 Days of Christmas, the operation consisted of 11 successive days of raids by B-52 Stratofortress bombers flown in from Andersen Air Force Base in Guam. The only day that both sides got a reprieve was Christmas Day, when troops were given a 36-hour break to celebrate. During that time, Nixon ordered the North Vietnamese to return to the bargaining table. The North Vietnamese refused. So the bombings continued until December 29th, when they agreed to resume peace talks. In 11 days, the Linebacker II this operation dropped 15,000 tons of bombs via 729 U.S. Air Force sorties involving about 12,000 airmen. Defense Department records show the raids destroyed or damaged 1,600 structures, 500 rail targets, 10 airfields, and 80% of North Vietnam's electric generating capacity. 15 B-52s were also destroyed in the process, killing 35 men and leading to the capture of nearly 40 American prisoners of war. The resumed peace talks that came from the campaign led to the Paris Peace Accords in January 1973. The U.S. ended its involvement in the war soon after, but as you all know, the last American troops wouldn't leave the country for another 2 years. Certainly was a difficult time in our nation's history. Yeah. So now I've got a couple connected to Christmas through song. So I grew up in an unusual house too. I tell people I'm a baby boomer in a millennial body. Or maybe I'm Generation X. I'm 41. There's kind of like... But my parents had us watching classic movies, John Wayne, Roy Rogers, and listening to people like Bing Crosby. And so this story about this song, it's interesting as I read a little bit more about it. I always knew it kind of was connected to military life, but before becoming one of the most beloved pop Christmas songs in history, I'll Be Home for Christmas was the most requested song at overseas USO shows during World War II. During that conflict, composer Kim Gannon wrote the lyrics from the perspective of a deployed service member. His lyrics spoke first to a generation at war and then echoed through time as the most recorded Christmas song ever. Initially recorded by Bing Crosby in 1943, I'll Be Home for Christmas was a nearly overnight sensation in America, hitting number 3 in the Billboard charts. And in 1944, the song made it to the top 20 during the holiday season. While the song was a beloved morale booster for American troops and their families, the managers of the BBC banned it on the airwaves in the United Kingdom, afraid that it would have the opposite effect for their war-torn and war-weary population. It's kind of interesting. So, also, I have another one here. This is just kind of a funny one that I'm going to share with my kids later. Snoopy's Christmas, remember that? Snoopy's Christmas is released by the Royal Guardsmen in 1967 as a novelty song about a holiday encounter with our favorite cartoon beagle and his arch nemesis. While, of course, the song is fictional, so it draws on a historical figure in an event from World War I, the Christmas truce, as it's called. So Snoopy's foe is the Red Baron, the real Prussian fighter pilot, fought for Germany in World War I. And then this little write-up goes on to talk about Manfred Albrecht Frerrer. This is a long name. I'm not done yet with the name. Manfred Albrecht Frerrer von Richthofen, I'm saying that wrong, left the cavalry in 1915 and quickly became one of the most feared and revered fighter pilots in world history. At the time of his 1918 death at the hands of a British ace, Major Leno Hawker VC, the ace of aces, he was called, was credited with 80 kills. So that's a little bit of the story. So Snoopy's Christmas was also references the Christmas truce in 1914 and goes on. So anyway, and then White Christmas. I have a picture.
Oh, yes.
I've seen this movie probably a few times too many. But the World War I veteran, Irving Berlin, a year before the U.S. entered World War II, he and wrote this and first performed by Crosby days after the Japanese surprise attack on Pearl Harbor. White Christmas was one of the era's most well-known and beloved songs. When it hit the airways in 1941, it flopped, though, interestingly, going all but unnoticed by a traumatized nation. It was only the next year when it was in the film, originally called Holiday Inn, right? That became White Christmas. That White Christmas climbed Billboard's music popularity chart to number 1 and then stayed there for 11 consecutive weeks. The song's appeal was especially pronounced in the ranks of the U.S. military. Service members requested the song from American Forces Network Radio in droves and purchased thousands of copies of White Christmas on victory discs, they were called. And these were durable records troops would carry with them on the front lines. White Christmas became a holiday standard at overseas USO shows for Bing Crosby. His nephew recounted that Crosby once performed White Christmas in northern France. And Old Blue Eyes, as he was called, said it was the hardest thing he'd ever done. He had to stand there and sing White Christmas with 100,000 GIs in tears without breaking down himself. Of course, a lot of those boys, his nephew recounts, were killed in the Battle of the Bulge a few days later. But why would White Christmas, a single that makes no mention of war, touch such a nerve with service members and the American public? Famed American poet Carl Sandburg observed in the Chicago Tribune that the frenzy around the song was tied directly to the war. So much so that he should call war a blessing, he wrote. We don't like it. The hopes and prayers are that we will see the beginnings of 100 years of white Christmases with no blood spots of needless agony and death on the snow. Yeah. I've got a story from my friend Chris Plekenpole, Captain Chris Plekenpole. He wrote this book, and this is a compilation of his journals. So he went to West Point, graduated West Point, went to Ranger School, Air Assault School, and then he was on a tour to Korea, and he thought he was going to be done with it. I think it was 6 years of active duty and then a couple years of reserve to finish out his commitments after graduating West Point. And he's over there in Korea and just a few days away from going back home to Texas where he wanted to be. And he got this call. You're going to Iraq. And he went there with his unit and about $100 million worth of equipment. And his responsibility was to secure and clear and secure the road between Fallujah and Baghdad at the height of the conflict. And he lost half of his men. And he started journaling about once a week. And this is the first one, and he has another one called Faith in the Fog of War 2. So just before deploying to Iraq, he had a radical conversion on him, became a Christian. And this is kind of woven throughout this book. And then he and I met when we were seminary students together at Dallas Theological Seminary. And we'd work out early in the morning and study. And then he'd say, hey, you ever thought about being a chaplain? Maybe. Tell me about this. This was back in 2007, 2008. We were classmates. But he wrote an entry here, December 25th, 2004. Christmas in Iraq. And I'm going to read a portion of it to you. The Christmas season. A time when families gather to celebrate. But for those of us in Iraq, it has been a little different. A globe lies between us and our loved ones, and Christmas trees are decorated at home in our absence. Instead of opening presents with his kids, a father waits in line for the next available phone. Instead of an 18-year-old hanging out with mom and dad and the folks, he sits on his cot and plays a video game. Add to that loneliness the cold, blustery weather of an Iraqi winter, and it combines to form a gloom that weighs the heart of even the happiest of campers. What a lot of my men did not know was that Virginia Cook Realtors in Dallas, Texas had made it their personal mission to bring a little home over to us in Iraq. 70 boxes containing everything from basketballs to peanut butter and jelly to wet wipes filled our day room. On Christmas morning, I asked the men to assemble in the day room. They filed in, some still groggy, others still dressed in all their gear, fresh back out of sector. Virtually all of them were unengaged, disinterested, and apathetic. This was not where they wanted to be for Christmas. I loved watching as they walked in and saw the mountain of gifts. Looks of awe and disbelief came over their faces. Before we dug in, I grouped them all together for a picture. We prayed. We talked about our fallen comrades and smiled, remembering how one was always talking about Jesus and the other bragging that he was an actual porn star. Then we dove in with a flurry of ribbon snipping and paper ripping. We joked, behaved like boys, behaved like family. I stood back at one point and watched my men interacting as brothers, forgetting the troubles of battle, forgetting the heartache of missing home. Men together, a band of brothers. Some were loaders, some were tank commanders, some gunners, some tank drivers, supply soldiers, mechanics, medics, artillerymen, infantrymen, and presiding over the unit was the father figure offering his wisdom, my first sergeant, senior enlisted men in the company. We each have our roles. In battle, every man counts. No man is unimportant. Anytime someone gets hurt, it affects the entire company. The entire company feels the effects of discord. And especially in the event of a death, the entire company feels the loss. We have many parts, but we function as one. We have a common cause. Sometimes painful discipline must be enforced, but it saves lives. Everyone is a valuable part. We have no spares. Some people at home in the U.S. may think that we rally around the flag, mom, and apple pie. Those are all important to us, but in war, when we fight for the man to our left and the soldier to our right. He goes on to talk about that related to his walk with Jesus in Iraq. That's a little entry about Christmas Day 2004, and my buddy Captain Chris Fleckenbull, who's now a father of 4 rambunctious boys and a pastor in Austin, Texas. And I'd love to have him and his wife Adrienne and the boys come up maybe and do some kind of resiliency event for our troops at Wright-Pat. I've got one other one about a song. This is my favorite Christmas carol, O Holy Night. I love to sing it. I love to hear it sung. I've never heard of this particularly connected to war. I knew it was written in a certain era, but here's a little write-up. A decade after O Holy Night was written by a French village's commissionaire of wines, it was entitled Cantique de Noël, caught the eye of an American abolitionist and writer. In 1855, John Sullivan Dwight was moved by a verse that declared, "Truly he taught us to love one another. His law is love, and his gospel is peace. Chains shall he break, for the slave is our brother, and in his name all oppression shall cease." Dwight translated that song, renamed it O Holy Night, and published it in Dwight's Journal of Music. And the translation was well received, especially in abolitionist circles, and served as an unofficial anti-slavery anthem for a nation teetering on the edge of civil war. There are many tales about O Holy Night that crop up in unverified battle legends. It is sometimes noted as one of the songs sung by French troops during 1914's Christmas Truce and the Franco-Prussian War of 1870 as well. But what makes the night holy? From my faith perspective, is because a Savior was born to come to save us from our sins and be the Savior of the world, not just for some people, but everybody. Glad tidings of great joy for everybody. For unto us a child is born. Unto us a son is given, and the government will rest on his shoulders. And his name will be called Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, the Everlasting Father, the Prince of Peace. And he's the one who I worship. That's what O Holy Night is all about. And for me, what this Christmas season is about. And I look forward to the day when there will be peace through him, when the government rests on his shoulders. So there's my Christmas Talk 2.0. Thanks for inviting Airman Stotts and I to come tonight.
Okay, I'm in tears.
Yeah.
That was wonderful. That was absolutely wonderful. And excuse me, I have a, okay, read this. And histamine just makes my mouth so dry, so I can't talk otherwise. I am absolutely so impressed with your commitment in such a short span of time, everything that you have learned, and that you are passionate about, and there is no doubt that you will be a blessing to many people to come. As is our chaplain Mike. So at this point, we do a couple of things, and Chaplain Mike is supposed to do this. So, let's see, who do I have? Airman Stouts, if you will. Let's see, I'm on this side. All right, here we go. Nick, you gotta turn that way so we can get a picture. Miami Valley Military History Museum, Certificate of Appreciation. To all who shall see these presents, greeting. The certificate is awarded to Airman First Class Barack Stouts, United States Air Force, in recognition of his service to our great nation and for his continued dedication, commitment, and support to the ideals of patriotism this 11th day of December in the year 2024. We do Christmas gifts, and we happen to have that that Barbara, our librarian, found, and this couldn't be more perfect. The true story of the Christmas truce,
Wow.
British and German eyewitnesses accounts from the First World War.
Look at that, it's providential.
Look
It
at
is. I hope you will read that with us at the end.
Definitely would love
Yes,
to.
yes.
Thank you.
Okay, Chaplain Mike. I'm gonna attempt your last name in this. No, maybe I'll just stick with Chaplain Mike. Yeah.
That's fine.
I butcher it. It doesn't matter how I pronounce it. All right. Miami Valley Military History Museum, Certificate of Appreciation. To all who shall see these presents, greeting. The certificate is awarded to Chaplain Captain Mike, United States Air Force, in recognition of his service to our great nation and for his commitment, dedication, for his continued dedication, commitment, and support to the ideals of patriotism this 11th day of December in the year 2024. Yours is bulky because Jody found
Oh my goodness.
Jody found a pillow that she said yes should go in.
Oh my goodness.
Yes. Yeah, so we'll blame that on
Well,
Jody.
I
for
send
bulkiness.
greetings from my wife Stephanie to
Yes.
dearly wanted to be here, bring the baby.
Yes.
Baby Emily was running a bit of a fever.
Ooh.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's why they
Last
didn't come
time
out
we
in the
saw
cold.
Stephanie, she was,
Yeah.
yeah,
She really wants. So we'll come by. We'll come by with
Yes.
baby.
that would be nice.
Wow.
Goodies.
Wow. Thank you.
You're welcome. Goodies for the whole family to enjoy. I think this is one of the best Christmas messages. I really do. You gentlemen are absolutely wonderful. Hey, want to thank everybody for coming. And Mark has a